Joining us on stage now, primary co-founder and general partner, Ben Sun.
So excited to introduce two really great speakers. Johnny Ho is a co-founder and chief strategy officer at Perplexity AI, helping build a powerful search assistant that combines AI-generated responses with cited sources, offering users quick, comprehensive answers while maintaining transparency and accuracy. So I'm sure there's a lot of Perplexity users out there, so it's great. It's going to be a really interesting founding story. Cack Wilhelm is a general partner at IVP, focusing our investing energy on high-growth companies helmed by technical founders. Cack's a former professional runner with a background in enterprise sales, so great little combo. She brings discipline and ambition to coaching founders to reach their full potential, which sounds like we all could use that in our corner. So please welcome Johnny and Cack.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us. Well, Johnny, you're one of three co-founders, and I think if you might surprise the group if you told them how long you had known your CEO before you started Perplexity. So maybe you can start with that.
Yeah, so before I started Perplexity, I knew Dennis from 10 years ago, roughly, at Quora. You can say Quora is kind of like the manually generated answer engine. Perplexity is more of the automated, AI-powered answer engine. Yeah, Dennis and Arvind were working on some similar research in reinforcement learning, which is pretty relevant even today. And yeah, actually didn't really meet Arvind until, I think, a few weeks before Perplexity started. Since the beginning, there's always been like a very high degree of like trust and like the checks and balances between the co-founders. I think even though we haven't really spent as much time as you might expect, I think it still persists today.
Yeah, so if you caught that, Johnny only knew Arvind for 3 weeks and had barely met in person when they started the company, which I just think is very contrary to lots of second-time founders, or you've worked with your founders before. But I mean, you and Dennis had known each other for a long time and worked together. So bring it forward to today. Do you guys spend a lot of time together now? Do you have like a key ritual that you utilize at Perplexity that you think works for you?
Yeah, so as I said, the trust and the transparency really keeps going today. We still have weekly roundups and weekly goals that keep us accountable. And we still try to maintain like very aggressive goals. So for example, you only hit like 75% of goals every week. Yeah, and then Arvind nowadays is very busy traveling across the world, but I try to stay just within the two offices, SF and New York, and really just try to keep the team pretty tight and grounded.
I think 2021, a lot of the emphasis was on like growing. I mean, Matt Harris talked about these big rounds and growing really fast. I think you guys almost with the point of pride say like you're small enough to do this or you're small enough to do this other thing. What is how small is the team, and sort of like what is the motivation for keeping it small and tight?
Mm-hmm. So in SF, we have roughly 30 people and growing, and we have 8 in New York. In New York, it's even scrappier than SF. We still like work in a co-working space, Industrious actually, not too far away from here. Yeah, the motivation there is just to keep things agile, right? Just as a bigger firm, it's harder to change direction. It's harder to iterate. It's hard for the engineers and ICs to stay really close to the users. And as you grow, you still want to keep that. You still want to keep everyone owning a good chunk of the product. So as your company grows in size and scale, and your product grows in scope, each person still owns like roughly the same amount, instead of just less and less and just like more cogs in a machine.
So if you're an employee at Perplexity, what about that appeals? Like, what are elements of that you think make it so that Perplexity is a great place to work as an individual contributor?
Yeah, we try to foster that trustworthy environment where everyone can learn and adapt, especially given outside and internal feedback. We want to keep the feedback loops open, the communication channels open, so that everyone has that ownership and has that idea of where to go next with the products. So that you don't have to have as many product managers kind of telling you exactly what to do, ABC, right? You kind of have your own vision, that fits within the larger company vision, but you still have directions that point roughly all in the same direction, instead of, worst case, like competing with each other or trying to step on each other's toes.
One thing that stands out to me about you guys, both from the inside but also from the outside, is just like the number of things that you guys have cooking at any given time. And then when I later learned that, I don't know if people saw the NFL, the Monday Night Football ad from Perplexity, but that was just like spun up by one person, enabled by another, and like boom, it was on Monday Night Football. But how, like you run product, so how do you foster that sort of organic idea generation and then seeing things through to fruition like quickly?
So at any given time, each product only has one DRI. So like depending on which stage in the cycle it is, if it's very early on, if it's just in the ideation stage, then it maybe just belongs to like someone with that vision, right? But then it's passed on to someone with that execution capability. And then it's passed on to another person. So at any point in time, there's always something that pushes someone to move faster instead of slower. And it is kind of contrary to like, traditional wisdom in that you should focus, but each person has that focus, even though we're running many projects in parallel, right? So you have both the ability to do a lot of things as a small company, but you have the focus per individual as well.
So give us an example of a product that was like one person's idea, boom, we've all played with it at Perplexity, but it was just someone's rare initiative.
Yeah, so if you have the Perplexity mobile app, I'm sure a lot of you do, then there's a Discover page, and then there's notifications from that every so often. Really, at the very beginning, that was just me playing around in my spare time, just trying to come up with helper queries that help the user understand what Perplexity was all about. And then from there, we just rose the bar incrementally, right? And then every single person that joined that project was not just optimizing it; they were reinventing it. Right, so they took their own ideas. Like, what if it was more like a feed? What if it was more visual? What if it was more presentable and readable? What if it could then be sent as a push notification? Things like that. And even though there was no overarching kind of vision from the very beginning, we were able to take quick steps that constantly just we're able to sacrifice the old ideas and create new ones.
Very cool. Keith Raboy earlier talked about, he talked about a lot of things, but he talked about just sort of founders working all the time, 6 days a week, 7 days a week. You tell me that when you're not at work, you don't think about work. But I don't know how you do that. So maybe you can share with the audience.
It's fair, yeah. We have a lot of people on Slack messaging us at all times. So it's hard to get away from that. But luckily in New York, it's easy to find other things to do, right? There's ping pong to play. There's video games. There's pool. There's all kinds of things that enabled me to just get out of the office and honestly away from Slack, even if it's 1 hour every weekend or so. And I think all my friends and family understand that work is all very focused during that period, 15 hours a day or whatever it gets up to sometimes. But outside of that, they understand not to ask me questions about work, not to bother me too much if something's going on in the news, things like that. I think having that separation enables me to completely focus and dial in when I'm working, and then just completely zone out when I'm not.
Let's talk about New York SF, because Ben asked you earlier where you're from. You're from the Bay Area. I'm from the Bay Area. I'm biased, but you live here and you choose to continue to live here. So what is it about New York? I mean, you're talking to a sea of people from New York who are delighted to hear that you're choosing New York over San Francisco. So, enlighten them. Yeah,
so there's a bunch of people at Perplexity that chose New York over SF. And we still try to convince them to move over every so often. We at the beginning, from the very beginning, we always had a remote first culture. So we had people from all kinds of backgrounds all across the world. One of our engineers works in the Philippines. We have people from all time zones. This is good for coverage, just so that you have people looking at the product all times, but also good for just diversity of viewpoints, right? So growing up in in San Jose and then visiting SF a lot, you get the sense that everyone works in tech, everything's about AI, but it's really not true, right? AI is invisible in most products, especially the ones that are, as you get more and more connected to the real world, it's more and more invisible. And having that diversity of past experiences, I actually worked in finance for a bit, for 5 years, just understanding that the physical world is still really behind, right? In finance, technologies are still just powered by very simple models. AI is not really actually much of a story in many cases. A lot of things are just manual, and will continue to be manual for the next, 10 years until they actually can be fully automated. Understanding that those industries are still really behind and there's a lot of value that needs to be delivered still is really core to our mission.
You've talked about how you think San Francisco likes to overcomplicate, and there's a utility to the average person in New York and how they think about that. Maybe elaborate.
Mm-hmm.
You've also said, you try not to use buzzwords, like you guys vehemently try not to say agent and reg and all these things, and maybe it's correlated.
Right, so I think the general trend in SF is try to promote your company through the use of buzzwords. And then that kind of like leans a little bit too far into promoting your product through buzzwords, right? I think using words like RAG and agent are not actually new ideas, right? Having an agent is basically just a computer that makes decisions, right? That's not like a new idea, right? And then RAG is basically just, a way of finding and searching for information, right? That's also not really a new idea. I think more presenting it in a way that is digestible by the end user, understands where the source of truth is, as opposed to trying to overcomplicate it, is our general trend.
What about you guys move quickly? It also means that you make enemies along the way sometimes, some faults, mistakes. Arvin has said that over time he's just gotten hardened to waking up in the morning and he's sort of moved to bring it on, I can take it. What about you? How do you cope with Perplexity being in the news, sometimes for good things, sometimes for bad?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I also worked in finance for a long time, and you just get hardened to these things. You wake up in the morning and things change. The world is different from the previous. You just have to adapt. I think just staying humble, just making sure that as you're making the mistakes, you're learning quickly, you're staying honest, you have that open line of communication that I mentioned, just to make sure that you're staying grounded and you're trying to actually, recover from the mistakes. And the mistakes are good. Every time you make a mistake, you get negative feedback. Negative feedback's good. You just learn from it. I think I still want to instill that in every single person at Perplexity, understanding that what we have today is honestly very, very basic compared to what we'll have in a year. And if you don't stay true to yourself and keep iterating, you're not going to get anywhere.
So Ben outed me. I was a runner. I think I'm comfortable saying I learned everything I know from being a competitive runner. You were a math Olympiad, so I could run fast. I couldn't do math fast or whatever you did. But how much of that plays out today? How much of your character was built doing math Olympiad? Amongst what I would say a lot of AI researchers came from math Olympiad. So it's a good club to be in. But what did that teach you?
Yeah, so again, it's not really the actual skill itself. I think math Olympiads are being slowly commoditized, as you can tell from the news today, right? The AI is encroaching on that space rapidly. I think really it's more just the skill set of knowing how to adapt, how to get to a final destination across many years, right? So for context, most people who start training for Math Olympiads started middle school. Where is that going to end? I don't know, high school, college, even past that. There's no end in sight, but you just keep trying to get better no matter what. I mean, it's kind of not fulfilling in a way, but it's also good that you have that mission going.
Okay, so last question. You guys talk about how you want to build a technical product that's loved by everyone, which I think the setup is that should be hard, right? Because not everyone is going to appreciate the technical product. But I think lots of founders today are trying to do the same thing, right? They're trying to incorporate AI, which is highly technical, but then be beloved, universally beloved. So do you have sort of a pithy, I don't know, 1 or 2 line on how one does that?
It's hard to put in one line. I think just staying true to the users. I think just staying as close as you can, understanding things from their perspective, which means just using your own product, just understanding, just getting away from the technical buzzwords, as I mentioned. Even just asking users what they want sometimes can give you insights. Wonderful.
Well, for all those out there who haven't tried Perplexity, it's just a download away or a website away, and we encourage you all to use it.
Yeah, thanks.